Welcome to Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant podcast. These are the stories of those who have received, given, and who are waiting for the gift of life, organ transplantation. Now here's your host and heart and kidney recipient, BJ Odom.
Welcome to the Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant podcast, where we explore the extraordinary world of organ transplantation. Each week we share inspiring stories and introduce you to remarkable individuals sharing their own transplant stories. Be sure to support the podcast by leaving a 5-star review and subscribing on your preferred podcast platform. Have a transplant story yourself to share or have comments about the podcast? We would love to hear from you. Just email us, giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to connect with us on Facebook at Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. This is BJ Odom, the guy with more parts than a chicken nugget. It's my new memoir packed with laughs, heart, and unbelievable true story of survival you've heard me talk about right here on the Gift of Life. Get your copy today, More Parts Than a Chicken Nugget, available on Amazon. As we welcome you to episode 101. Today's episode is one that really hits the heart. We're joined by Brian Springer, a fighter who's already endured 4 open heart surgeries and now living with an LVAD as he waits for a life-saving heart transplant. But Brian's journey is even more challenging as his blood type is O positive, with 99% antibodies, making the search for a matched donor incredibly difficult. Still, his faith, his strength, and his positivity shine through in a powerful way. His story is a reminder of how important organ donation truly is, and how one decision can save a life. This is a conversation you won't forget. Brian Springer is coming up next. Welcome to the podcast, Brian, and as always, it's a pleasure to have you on. And we would like to start things out by you telling us just a little bit about yourself, Brian.
43 years old now. I live in Missouri with my wife. We have we'll be a 3-year-old daughter coming up in May, and then we have an 8-year-old dog as well.
Every story has a beginning. Every story has an ending, and thank God yours does not have the ending yet. But where did all this begin there, Brian?
Yeah, so I was 26 years old in 2009, and I was noticing just extreme fatigue all the time. I was still very active, and one of the things that it was one of my favorite hobbies to do was hockey. So I was still doing that regularly, but coming to realize that there was something wrong. So I went to my doctor. And I had more or less an assumption that I had some form of sleep apnea or something like that. And that doctor sent me to another doctor who sent me to the hospital to get an echocardiogram, the ultrasound of the heart. And that night they called me and told me, don't do any physical activity. Definitely don't play hockey until you speak with the cardiologist. And the only thing they told me was that my heart was leaking. So, of course, as many would do, I spent the entire night searching what leaking heart meant. And I came to a conclusion that I likely had what they call the bicuspid aortic valve, where there's only 2 leaflets instead of 3 leaflets. So the valve itself doesn't close fully, which then causes blood to leak back into the heart instead of going out to the body like it should. And so the next day I met with a cardiologist, and he confirmed exactly what it is that my suspicions were, but then instantly just filled with dread. I had read up a lot of what was entailed, right? That there was going to be an open heart surgery. They would implant this metal device that would replace my valve into my heart. I'd be on blood thinners the rest of my life. So there would be a considerable change to how I was living life as a 26-year-old overnight. And it was really, really daunting. But I managed to get out to my car and sat there in my own despair to a degree. But when I had to call my parents that day, that's when I broke. Telling them, Telling them what I had just heard was one of the hardest things I ever had to do. Just knowing the fear was putting in them. I ended up hanging up on the call, and I sat there in the car for about, I don't know, 5 minutes or so, just bawling. But then, believe it or not, I actually pulled myself together a bit, because what I started to think about was the fact that these valves are fabricated, right? They create them. I'm not in a situation where I need a heart transplant. Literally thought this, that I would need a heart transplant. So therefore I'm not sitting there waiting for somebody to pass away and to get a heart given to me. Like, I just got to plan the surgery. I got to get through it, and I'll find a way, and it'll be all right. But the next week I was back at work, and I was kind of breaking all the news to my coworkers, who each one by one in complete shock about what's happening, until I started to talk with a gentleman that I used to work with, who's about the same age as I am. And as I'm telling him, he just looks at me like completely unfazed, and it was very weird. And his response was, "Oh, you're going to get a zipper too." I'm sorry, what? It turns out he had an aortic valve replacement years before. He actually had his at 21 years old. And I'm sitting there, and immediately the first thought that popped in my head was, wait, we play hockey together. How can he have had this replacement and play hockey? And that's when he started to tell me about that there were other options. You can do a tissue valve instead of a mechanical valve. And then you're not on a lifetime's prescription of blood thinners. And from that moment on, it was like, holy cow, I'm letting other people kind of steer me a direction without giving me all the options. And, given the options, I might choose a very different path. So I really began to really dig in at that point. Not that I wasn't already reaching out to anybody that we knew, family, friends, about, what surgeon I should get, where I should go, et cetera. But definitely started to think about what life might be like with this tissue valve versus mechanical valve. And ultimately, I chose the tissue valve. The downside to those is they have a lifespan. They eventually deteriorate and wear out, and you need to get a new one. So the second I accepted that tissue valve, I knew I was signing myself up for 2 surgeries, right? So I did that, and I recovered remarkably well. I was out of the hospital in 5 days. I always tell people it's like a point of reference, because it's really easy to see. If you're playing hockey, people know, yeah, you're perfectly fine. So, I always say 3 months later, I was playing hockey. And that's just the truth. And it was kind of the representation of how well I was doing. But that was the final step, like the final piece of my life that I kind of had before all this hit me. And I got it back. So it was also like a way to claim victory to me. So that happened. Unfortunately, about 7.5 years later, that valve wore out. Somehow, some way it tore. Not to say that it was going to wear out faster in me as a younger individual, and I knew that, but it was still shorter than the time I had hoped for. So I wasn't quite ready for blood thinners again, and to change my life drastically in my early 30s. So I went ahead and did a tissue valve again, signing myself up for now what would be 3 open heart surgeries. But I knew what I wanted out of my quality of life, and I knew that I could get through this again. And actually, the second time around was a little bit easier for me, recovering, simply because of the first time I was on the table for 8 hours. And you've had an open heart as well, I believe, right?
Oh, yeah. I've had, let me see, if I count them all, it's probably been about 4 or 5.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you're up there where I'm getting to. So you're well aware, right, that when you're on the table for that long, your back, your shoulders get killed because of where you're laying, but also when they spread the bone open, right, all that goes jammed back into your shoulders, and that's where a ton of the discomfort and pain comes from. So when I was on the table for 8 hours to the first one, because they tried to repair the valve and then actually did some additional work, the second one was only 4 hours. So I was actually way more comfortable early on from the second one than I was after the first. So I was able to rest better. I was able to get to sleep. So it made the recovery significantly easier. And just like the first one, 3 months later, I was back playing hockey. Just didn't faze me and went back to life as I knew it almost, right? So that's kind of where I was at when it gets to June of 24. Leading up to it, I knew that I was having some issues with my valve. I actually moved up my echo in advance of when it was supposed to be and confirmed, something was definitely wrong. So we began the discussion about what to do, and it kind of led to doing a TAVR. And I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No, why don't you explain that to the audience?
Yeah. So there's a surgical open heart, valve replacement that's been around for a long period of time. In the late 2000s, or late aughts, I should say, they started to introduce putting a valve in through the leg, through the groin, similar to like a stent. It goes into the spot and they pop it in. It's much more complicated than that, but to simplify it. And it had routinely only been used kind of in the patients that couldn't survive a true surgical open heart. But it had been becoming more and more used. And in my situation, already having 2 open hearts, the scarring and everything that's associated with that, it might be advisable to go ahead and do the TAVR, which was exciting to me because I would go home the next day and my recovery would be about 4 weeks in total. So I'm going, holy cow, this is incredible, right? I bought time and technology has come through for me. But unfortunately, the day before that surgery, I was made aware that the surgeon had seen some things in my echo that made him very cautious about doing the TAVR and worried that perhaps a section of my previous valve that needed to be replaced would break off and potentially give me a stroke. And so he wanted to do the full surgical replacement. So suddenly I had to put myself together and be prepared for a third open heart. And I did and spent all day thinking about what to do. Do I do the mechanical valve? Do I do the tissue valve? But knowing full well that they're doing the TAVRs inside the tissue valve that I would put in right now and very unlikely to have further complications, that we had a pretty good plan for that valve, a TAVR, and potentially maybe a TAVR inside a TAVR, or God knows what, if we go 20 years out from that point on. But definitely something that very logically could take me through end of life. So that's the move I took, and I did the tissue valve again. And once again, left the hospital in 5 days, was ahead of schedule, was at home feeling great. I mean, relative. But unfortunately, 9 days after that, I had a blood clot go into my heart. And that's when everything changed. That blood clot went into a very difficult area to access that actually had been built as kind of part of the full valve replacement. I can go into further detail, but I won't do that for most listeners. But in short, I had a heart attack for about 4 to 5 hours while I was laying in the cath lab, attempting to get that clot resolved. One of the first things they do when a patient comes in those serious complications I had a full blockage, or a STEMI, as they might call it, medical terms. And one of the first things they'll do to address the blood perfusion to the rest of the body is to put in an Impella. So it's a device that basically takes over the pumping of the blood for the heart. Unfortunately for me, because having this brand new valve, they couldn't thread the Impella through. So they couldn't get that in. I ended up being placed on ECMO. I don't know if you're familiar with ECMO.
Yeah, that's the big machine, right? That keeps you going.
Yeah. Yep. It goes out through the groin and in through the other groin. And you're bedridden when you're on that. You can't lift your body more than 30 degrees. And that's how I woke up. I remember everything from the moment when I started having the heart attack, which initially just felt like heartburn, to the point when they sedated me in the cath lab. And then I woke up and I was attached to this machine and I had no idea what happened. But over the course of the next week, a tremendous team there at Missouri Baptist in St. Louis that took care of me. Sorry.
Hey, you know what? Sometimes when I tell my story, it gets tough because you have those memories and it hurts. But if if you need to take a second, we can take a second. If you're ready to go on, we'll go on.
I'm all right. It's just, Yeah, you have the flood of everything coming back and the emotions that were raw and real at that point in time. But yeah, so the course of the next week, they would attempt to decannulate me or take me off the ECMO by slowly turning down the support. And things were looking optimal at first, but unfortunately, at the end of a week, when they did the final study to determine whether or not I was a candidate to get taken off, it was clear that I had very extensive heart failure. And that at that point, my only real option was to get either a transplant or, potentially an LVAD. But everybody was pretty hopeful for a transplant because I really had, zero other issues. It was just this really bad luck of my heart getting destroyed by a blood clot following a surgery. So in any case, they then shifted me to the big hospital here in St. Louis, Barnes-Jewish, and they began the heart transplant testing immediately. But that didn't get very far because they got the blood results back for my antibodies, and my antibodies are at 99%.
Oh, wow.
What that equates to is that only about 1% of the hearts that would become available as a donor heart would be something that could match for me. And the likelihood of me finding a match, as sick as I was at that point in enough time, was extremely low. So, let alone it's also above the threshold based upon other metrics that are there that Barnes wouldn't even take the transplant. It was not a candidate, essentially. So the only other option then for me to live and to potentially leave that hospital was to put in an LVAD. And I don't know, how familiar are you with LVAD? Should I explain that a bit?
For someone who's listening, I'm pretty familiar with them because I know some people that have the LVAD and are doing fabulous with them at the present time. Also, like you, waiting for a heart transplant. But if you would just, in simple man's terms, why don't you explain what they're all about?
Yeah. So essentially they go and they put a pump into your heart. So it's another open heart surgery. It places the pump at the bottom of your left side of your heart. So the blood falls down it and it pumps it out the same way your heart would pump, except for it's a continuous flow. So it is a little bit of an adjustment. You don't have a pulse, which is really odd, especially when you go to a doctor's office that maybe isn't all that familiar with your current situation, and they think that you should be dead because they can't feel a pulse. It does a job of keeping you alive, and it's really built for a bridge to transplant. But I was told, hey, this is the rest of your life, right? This is what it's going to be because you're never going to qualify for a transplant with their antibodies. And, obviously there's some downsides to it. There's a line that comes out of your stomach so it's a permanent hole, right? It is always prone to infection. And that's one of the biggest concerns with this device. For me, personally, it's been a lifesaver, but at the same time, it's not necessarily been all roses. Because my heart failure wasn't gradual. A lot of people, you slowly decline over time, and eventually you get to the point where you can't do anything on your natural heart, and the LVAD gives you more energy. For me, I fell off a cliff, right? I was very active, and then suddenly, boom, LVAD and extreme heart failure. So I'm able to do a lot. I'm obviously able to chase my daughter around. But I certainly can't jog. I definitely can't play hockey. I don't have near the energy levels that I did, but it's all things relative, right, for each individual. But the LVAD can definitely do wonders for somebody who is already in a pretty bad state. Mm-hmm. That's okay. I understood that this is what I needed to stay alive, and that's what I was going to do. I want to be alive for as long as I can for my daughter, for my wife. And so I got into cardiac rehab, which I should take a step back. The day that I left the hospital, after being bedridden as long as I was, my muscle mass had deteriorated. I got home and I got down on the floor to pet my dog. And when I tried to stand up, I couldn't. I was completely exhausted. I had no strength. My brother had to help me up. And so I got up and got into my bed and crashed for like 7 straight hours. But fast forward a few months, I got into cardiac rehab, and in there, I was really able to kind of start to put my strength back. And at the conclusion of that session, which this is what I advocate for anybody that's ever been through any sort of, like, you really should participate as hard as you can in that cardiac rehab. And not just from a cardio standpoint, but also build strength, right? You're going to have lost strength in the hospital, but even putting on additional strength is just going to make your heart that much more efficient. And it's going to make your life a lot better. So I always advocate to any of, like, people I see in our LVAD group that are brand new, is to take advantage of everything that they can out of that, and get the most out of it, because it's going to help a ton. And it did for me, which then got to the point where 6 months after my surgery, my team actually suggested I go down to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, if you don't know, is one of, if not the leader in heart transplant in the country. And so another thing that they can do is handle complex cases like me, where my antibodies are through the roof, giving me a potential chance at a heart transplant. So all my paperwork got submitted down there, and April 21st of 2025, I was listed for transplant. So we're coming up on 1 year. The other thing with my antibodies is I'm also an O blood type. So that makes the combination very difficult to find a match. And I'm status 4 right now, which means it's very likely I'm going to be waiting several years to be able to find a match, unless I guess I get really sick and move up in status, which could conceivably, right, make it faster to find a match. But the problem with that is that it may not be enough time depending on how sick I get.
Yes. Now, are they doing, with it being Vanderbilt, and I'm not super, with antibodies and all that. I mean, I'm not super informed, but are they doing any like antibody studies? Because I know there was a gentleman that was looking for a kidney, although the study he was in never really helped any. But are there any new studies out there, anything that's maybe unable to reduce some of those antibodies to get you closer to finding a heart?
Yeah, absolutely. So what they refer to it as is desensitization. And it's right now that I've been through 2 rounds. And to kind of summarize it, just in case there's anybody out there listening that may have to do this as well, they start off with 3 separate days in which they run a process called plasmapheresis.
Okay, familiar with that.
When you first get admitted, you've had it before too?
Yes, I've had plasma and photopheresis both.
Yeah. So obviously you get admitted to the hospital for me, both times it was a week that I was down there. And they put a cath line in your neck. And so that's where they get all of their access and everything. But you just connect to the machine and it pulls your blood out. It spins the blood around, gets rid of all the plasma, because that's apparently, I guess, the antibodies bind to the plasma. So you're getting rid of all of your antibodies. Great. Awesome. Right. The problem is, as soon as the blood goes back in, the antibodies start rebounding. They start creating again. So another thing they then do is they add a drug called IVIG. And what that does is actually load your body with antibodies, but non-problematic ones. Actually, a friend of mine that I work with is a doctor, and he explained it to me best, is that think of it like it's a parking lot. You empty out all the spaces, and then you fill all those spaces with cars that aren't problematic, and then all the problem cars have nowhere to park. And that's kind of the idea around infusing IG with a patient following plasmapheresis. And then the last thing they would give me, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say that's the best I have ever heard that explained. So thank you, sir.
Yeah, it really made a lot of sense to me, right? When you think about it. And then the last thing they do is administer a drug. I know for a lot of patients over the years, it's been a drug called Rituxan. I happen to receive a drug called Velcade. And I know there's some other drugs that are out there, being utilized as well. But the point of these drugs is ultimately to stymie the response or the rebuilding of new antibodies as well. So it's like a 3-pronged approach to, eliminate the antibodies, give them nowhere to be, and then just stop them from reforming. But I've been through 2 rounds of that. And unfortunately, my total number is still at 99%.
Okay.
It wasn't a complete waste by any means, because there's definitely some improvements, the underlying numbers, which gets into a lot of the detail. I've looked through it all. I've read it all, because I'm one of those people that when I have learned about this, I have spent countless hours trying to read and understand as much of it as I can, so I can be well informed in any decisions I might make. But in the grand scheme of it, right, the number is still 99%. So I'm still in a really difficult spot to ever find a match.
Well, I wish you the very best of luck here. But what's the latest, or you just, like you said, you're still on the list and just kind of waiting for that magical day?
Well, yeah, from the optimistic viewpoint, right? The day before I got listed at Vanderbilt, my chances at transplant were 0. my chances are above 0 now that I'm listed with Vanderbilt. So that's what you got to kind of grab a hold of and hang on to. In the meantime, yeah, I know it's routine visits to Vanderbilt to have a checkup with them, make sure that everything's still status quo, right? I'm not having any major complications, and we more or less just wait. And that's where we bring in the more people that would become organ donors, it increases not just the odds that somebody's going to live, but someone like myself might even actually find a match. Because it's just, the greater the numbers, the better chance that I may someday be able to find a match. And people are going to hear me saying, "Hey, well, you're doing just fine. You're alive right now." And it's true, right? The LVAD is keeping me alive, but I look at my daughter and I fear, right, that at some point, at any point, right, I could get a clot. I could get an infection, get worse. Mm-hmm. And next thing you know, I'm in the hospital and I've got, days to survive, and I'm looking for, a 1 in a million chance to find a match on that heart. So yeah, things like that it scares the hell out of you. And I really wish that more people would really consider organ donation and what that provides. Because I'm not the only one that's in this boat. There's a good, I think, around 20 or so people out there, because I can look at OPTN's list and see there's about 20 of us that are blood type O that are at 98 or higher antibodies on the list right this moment.
Well, I definitely wish you the very best of luck with that. And like you said, the plus is you are spending time with your family and you are still here. But of course, it's cumbersome and it's worrying, and I understand that completely. So hopefully, now let me ask you this, because I know you said you went to Vanderbilt, but now I'm trying to look at my geographic brain that's not doing me well. But you're in St. Louis now. How far a drive is that to Vanderbilt from you?
Driving is about 4.5 hours from my door to their door.
Okay, so I was about 4 hours from my door to Tampa, so that makes sense then.
Yeah, so when you got the call, you had to drive the 4 hours?
Well, actually, when I got the call, I was in the hospital. So I was one of those that was in the hospital.
So you're a higher status.
Yeah, so I had the swan in me and everything, and it was really weird, and I don't understand it, and I'll explain it here real quick. I was one of those people that was in bad shape, but I guess I wasn't bad enough. They had to keep me in the hospital, or it was on a machine, but they would put me in I would be out for 10 days and then back in for 10 days. And they would put me in a swan. And then, after 10 days, they'd go, "Well, insurance says we got to send you home." So that would, take my status back down. But it was the last day of, I think, the third or fourth time that I'd been in the hospital for the 10 days. And, the next morning I was going to get released. And that was the night they came in about 2:00 in the morning and said, "We found you a heart. Tomorrow morning, you'll be getting that, the life-saving surgery that you've been waiting for."
Yeah, that's incredible. And, right this moment, and some offshoot chance that I somehow get a miracle, we've got a plan of action here with me and my family. I make one phone call and then I finish packing up with, what's left, because I've already got a go bag ready to go just in case. And we'll be in the car in under 15 minutes, beelining to Nashville. So, but yeah, odds are not high that I'm going to get that call anytime soon, but the reality is that there's still a chance I could get that call someday. And that's what I'm waiting on.
Well, I'm going to give you a quick story, and maybe that'll give you some hope too. So when I was 22 months old, I had my first open heart surgery. It wasn't correcting what they thought was wrong with me. And my parents were told I would live to see about 14 or 15. And then in 1968, an experimental surgery came along that got me going again. But of course, then I had bypass surgery, believe it or not, when I was in my 40s. And then by the time I was like 48, I believe it was, or 49, I got my heart transplant. And it was, all because of things that went on from my very second surgery. But remember that, things change in the medical field every day. And then that's how I kind of made it through my life and how I always believe today. You don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. So there could be, cures. There could be not cures, but, something that'll take down those antibodies. You never know what's going to come around the corner. So don't give up, keep fighting. And I believe you're going to get that heart, young man.
I couldn't agree more. From the moment that I made the decision to go with my first tissue valve, it's always been banking on medical advancement, right? Something else is going to come along and give me a better option. Didn't expect the giant deviation tour on the LVAD and transplant and everything, but we'll get there. And that actually makes me think, there's a number of different Facebook groups that are out there now for support. And there was one, someone wrote, because I guess they have a child that's, getting close to needing a transplant, and they're very worried about a situation where that patient or that child may have to have, say 3 transplants. And is there anybody that's ever had 3? And my only thought was, holy cow, it's like, but just relax and look at right now, because you might get 30 years right out of that first heart. You don't know. And as I can imagine right now, today, they're going back to 1996 and trying to explain how everybody's connected in this group on Facebook, or hell, just even trying to explain the existence of your phone and your smartphone that you use every day to someone in 1996. It's a very different world right now from then. And God knows where we're going to be in, 20, 30 years from now.
True. So true. Well, like I said, I wasn't supposed to live past my teens. And this year I just, coming up, I'll be 71, but I turned 70, last year, and not too far away from being 71, that little boy that his parents were told never lived past his mid-teens.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's a great story.
And that's what medical science has done for me. It's like, I'm down and out and ready to be gone. And then all of a sudden, we have this. So I always say, never give up, because you never know what tomorrow will bring.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, before we let you go, any final words? I always give everyone an opportunity if maybe we forgot something or you forgot something or something else that you want to say before we let you go. It's an amazing story. And Brian, thank you so much for sharing with us. But is any final words from you?
No, just reiterate my point of really encourage anybody and everybody to sign up to be an organ donor. You don't know what can happen to you. And, the best gift that you can give, in my opinion, for your family is to know that you yourself had helped save lives. And that's just such an incredible thing to pay forward. And I really encourage everybody to do so.
Thank you so much, Brian, for sharing your story with us today on The Gift of Life. Be sure to join us each week for a new heartfelt episode. And if you have a transplant story, email us, giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook, and also don't forget to like and share this episode with family and friends. And we would appreciate that 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Reminder, my memoir, More Parts Than a Chicken Nugget, isn't just a medical story. It's a survival story filled with humor, hope, and heart. It'll make you laugh, maybe cry. and definitely believe in second chances. Get yours now on Amazon. More parts than a chicken nugget. Another podcast you might enjoy is myself and former radio partner Bill Stevens. BJ and Bill, the podcast, all on the Podcast Playground Network. We want to thank them for making this podcast possible. Until next time, I'm BJ Odom. Thank you so much for being a part of our journey and reminding us all to appreciate each and every day and to treasure the extraordinary gift of life.
He was running on empty, heart fading fast. Doctor said, man, you ain't gonna last. But a stranger's kindness, a gift so true, turned the night sky into something new. He got a second chance, he got a brand new spark. Like a freight train rolling back from the dark. Gift of life, let the story be told. One heart beats, another takes hold. Give a little, save a soul. Ain't no greater rock and roll. 15 years later, the road got rough. The fight ain't over when the climb is tough. Needed a kidney, the race was on. Another hero stepped up, kept him strong. Every breath he takes is a tale of hope. One life saved, another can cope. Gift of life, let the story be told. One heart beats, another takes hold. Give a little, save a soul. Ain't no greater rock and roll. Doctor's hands, a donor's grace, running on down to a brand new place. Second chances don't come twice, but when they do, man, they feel so nice. So let's spread the word, let the people know. One yesterday lets a miracle grow. You don't need wings just to save a man, just a little love, a helping hand. Gift of life, let the story be told. One heart beats, another takes hold. Give a little, save a soul. Ain't no greater rock and roll. BJ still rocking, still standing tall, thanks to the ones who gave it all. Gift of life, hear the sound. Pass it on, pass it down. The Gift of Life podcast, hosted by BJ Odom. Listen now. Listen now.